las organizaciones multilaterales, el sector privado y las ONG, e iniciar enfoques innovadores para abordar las urgentes necesidades del agua en el mundo. En todo el mundo, el agua es el riesgo global número 1, el desafío que conecta a la Agenda 2030 para el desarrollo sostenible, nuestra mejor oportunidad para una acción inclusiva e integral. Oving también es Sherpa del panel de alto nivel sobre el agua de la ONU y Banco Mundial. En Oving formó parte del grupo de trabajo de reconstrucción del huracán Sandy del presidente Obama, donde dirigió los esfuerzos de innovación, resiliencia y reconstrucción a largo plazo. Desarrolló y dirigió el concurso Rebuild That Design e inició el concurso nacional de resiliencia ante desastres. Antes de unirse al grupo de trabajo, Oving fue el director general interino de planificación espacial y asuntos hídricos, director de planificación espacial de los Países Bajos. Henk enseña en Harvard GSD, la London School of Economics y la Universidad de Groningen. Su libro escrito junto con Jelti Buyenga, Too Big, Reconstruir por Diseño, un enfoque transformador del cambio climático, explora su trabajo sobre el clima y el agua para la administración Obama. En enero del 2018, Henk Oving fue galardonado con una membresía honoraria del Royal Institute of Engineers de los Países Bajos por su obra transformadora del agua global. En el Foro Urbano Mundial de febrero de 2020, Henk recibió el premio ISS Urban Professional Award 2020. Antes de dar inicio, vamos a explicar el uso de las opciones de interpretación, ya que la exposición será en el idioma inglés. Aquí vamos a compartir una pantalla en PowerPoint. Permítanme un segundo.
¿Ahí lo pueden ver?
No se está viendo. Se está viendo otra pantalla.
Un momento. Gen, si puede dejar de compartir la presentación solamente para darles la explicación de cómo deben, a dónde deben accesar para poder escuchar la presentación. Bien, aquí en su computadora puede aparecer esta opción. ¿Ahí sí la ven?
La puedes poner ampliarla, en proyección.
¿Así? Hay dos opciones.
Yo pienso que ahí se ve bien. Permítame un segundo. ¿Ok?
Y la otra opción es para los teléfonos celulares, que también aparece en los tres puntos. Listo.
Okay. Bueno, bienvenido, Henk. Ya puedes poner tu presentación y el foro es tuyo. Adelante. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Luis Frauka. And thanks so much to SIP for organizing. It's a real honor to be with you. Thanks also to the Dutch Embassy and our partners in Panama. In the Netherlands, it's now the afternoon, but also a special afternoon. It's stormy weather. We actually stopped all public transport and closed our storm surge barriers. So there's a storm coming up. So for my work as a water envoy, I actually should be, I should go outside, but it's perhaps a little bit dangerous. So thanks for inviting me. I will share a little story on water, but also see how we can get to a conversation on water. And for that, I will share my screen. Here we are. I hope you can see this, right? Does that work?
Sí, lo vemos.
Yeah, Okay, perfect. I start my talk with water to take a step back and look at the planet. If you look at our planet from outer space, and this image was taken already in 1972, you see a lot of water. And this image taken by 72 was also called the blue marble. So it gives you an immediate impression that there's more than enough water. But I do a little trick, and I take a big vacuum cleaner and I take all the water of the planet. So all of a sudden, it is still a sphere. It's still round. It's still this bulb. There are no holes in it. There's no big dents. And it means that water is only on the surface. Set over 70%, over 70% of the surface of the planet is water. But that is it. And if you put all that water back into a sphere, it becomes a very small sphere. And that is all the water that we have. So that is lakes, rivers, fresh water, salt water. So that's not a lot. And if you look close, there are 3 blue spheres. 1, 2, 3. And the smallest one, 0.4%, that is the water for human consumption. The water we can use as humans around the world. So while we think there is a lot of water, there actually is not a lot. And we learned this through the pandemic. We all experience around the world the pandemic, where your mother, your sister, your aunt, your brother, your boss, your prime minister, president, king, queen, princess, they all said, wash your hands. But for billions of people around the world, washing your hands is just not there. It's not possible. It's not accessible. And that is a challenge, because we need water for life. We need it for health. We need it for biodiversity. We need it for climate. But when you don't have it, it really is a challenge. Now, that is one, but water has many aspects. And I'd like to talk on some, but also one on climate. And we saw 2018, 19, 20, last year, storms, surges, floods, and droughts, they all combine. They become a massive challenge for the world. And there are no simple solutions to that answer. No infrastructure, single-focused infrastructure. They demand a type of action that is future-oriented. And it's also a type of action where we learn by practice that it has to be based in science. So we have to understand really what's at stake and trust data, but it also has to go by partnership, like partnerships across the world, between our 2 countries and the institutes we share, but also solidarity on the ground in the places that are at risk. How can water play a role from this valuing perspective in the context of our SDGs? There are some aspects to that, and I'd like to take you into some of these aspects to see if in our collaboration, in our partnership, we can actually focus on how we can move forward. And these are IPCC reports, covers of IPCC reports. And you all know them, and they speak clear and much clearer language these days, and they tell climate change is here, it's now, we did it, and now we have to change it. But the middle one, the Climate Change and Land report, comes from 2019, and it clearly explains that on one, the investments we make in our economy, in building our cities, our infrastructure, with every dollar we spend, we increase climate change. And the majority of those investments actually make climate change more, further away from 1.5 degree, the target we set in Paris. But the second part of that is that it says how we do it, and this is where I think, in my experience, the solution is how we do it also makes us more vulnerable. So on one end, by our investments, and that they're often creating a massive footprint, huge carbon footprint, and further fossil dependent and so forth, is the way how we develop our cities is already destroying that very nature that could actually protect us from climate impacts and also make us less vulnerable. But that is not what we do. So we really have to understand, Secretary Guterres said, understand better on how to do this, and how also means that we need to work together. Now we see the impacts of climate with floods and droughts and disasters across the world, and cities are very vulnerable to that. So the impact on our economies, our build-up space, is high when it comes to damages lost, trillions a year, World Bank and OECD estimate, but also people. The lives and livelihoods of the most vulnerable around the world are hit first, foremost, and hardest when it comes to climate impact. So thinking about climate means keep ourselves to 1.5 degrees, so mitigation, but at the same time, taking care of the most vulnerable first means adaptation and resiliency. But for that, we have to change something. I'll try to explain how water can play such a critical role. One, we come from a time where every problem we thought had a solution. You go from A to B, you build a road. And then you'll see. Turns out the road is, causing more traffic, more dynamics, more climate, destroying biodiversity, polluting water, moving people out of harm's way, and so forth. So a single solution creating multiple problems. And we come from a time where we thought that every problem could be dealt with one solution. But when, if we look at it, it turns out that every problem caused more problems. So you go from one problem to 10, and then from 10 to 100. We have to turn that around. We really have to look at the future comprehensively. And that is possible because we developed not only the Sustainable Development Goals, that is a full, holistic, comprehensive agenda for the future, that you can't cherry pick from. You can't say, I'll take one and you take two, and then she 7 and he 9. No. A holistic agenda that is interdependent. And we have a Paris Agreement that really puts a clear focus on climate, because climate is this big magnifying glass on top of the challenges we already have, making them more challenging, but also pressing on the interdependencies between them. Now, luckily, after Paris, many negotiations since the last COP, the 1.5 degree is still on the table. So that is one. But second, adaptation and resiliency are front and center. And at the COP, we hosted the first water pavilion. So for the first time in the history of the climate conference, we had a clear focus on water, where we know water offers this powerful driver for climate solution, securing a 1.5 degree mitigation, but also making sure that we build resiliency, not only in our socio-economic way, but also for inequality, climate justice. And because water touches upon everything in life, it brings everybody together. And we say in the Netherlands that investing in water has a trickle-down effect across all sustainable development goals. So it really, if you invest in water, your health security goes up, so your health costs go down. Invest in water, you secure biodiversity or reduce biodiversity loss. If you invest in water, you work on climate mitigation and adaptation. If you invest in water, you work on collaboration. You work on, of course, sanitation, on sustainable economic growth, on sustainable cities that are resilient, on biodiversity, and so forth. And for that, going back to Secretary Guterres, we have to understand water, like we said with the high-level panel on water, value water across all these aspects of life, all the SDGs, and manage water in a very inclusive way. But that means that the scheme of single-focused infrastructure solutions, we have to get rid of. We have to move to a comprehensive way forward, a way where we become proactive, not reactive, or even non-responsive, where every solution is the start for a change towards a sustainable future and not a reaction to crises from the past. So we have to turn our back to the past and our face to the future, and really say, in those challenges, in their interdependency, their connectivity, in the way on how water is cutting across all these SDGs, lies the solution. Now, for that, we have to look at the long term in this comprehensive way, and at the same time, build projects that are innovative now to bring that change comprehensively. We have to do it with everybody in a very inclusive way, but also in an accountable way, transparent. If we connect the dots, we build capacity, and that capacity is of critical importance because we need solutions, yes, but we also need the people. We need an enabling environment, we say, an enabling environment that has capacity individually, institutionally, and across. Now, that said, how do we get there? And it means that for driving those solutions out of the box that can help us overcome past practices, help us bypass vested interests, you need time, you need literally space, you need partnerships, you need to build trust, capacity, and you need to do this, on the long run. In the partnership, it is about consistency, continuity, and commitment. And that space to build trust, there has many words. Some call it the soft space, some call it the theory U. But I learned by organizing around water that space literally is a space where you bring people together. Why? Because water touches upon everything in life. So if you talk about water, you talk about health, you talk about the economy, you talk about biodiversity, you talk about jobs, you talk about inequality, securing education, and so forth. So bringing water into the conversation means bringing people to the table. And that is exactly what we need. That is what we did in the Netherlands. And I won't give you a history talk on the Netherlands because I agreed not to do that. You might know a cent or two about the Netherlands, but it was a crazy place with a lot of water, but where we started to organize ourselves. 900 years ago, we said, we have to work together. And that collaboration, 900 years ago, now still is the fourth layer of government in the Netherlands. In our constitution, it says we have cities, we have provinces, we have a national government, but we also have a water authority as the fourth layer of government. And that water authority is the governance structure that ensures that we work on water and water security across time. And it's exactly that partnership that is of critical importance if, as I said before, if we want to become more innovative, we need to focus on water collaboration. Now, I won't tell you everything about the Netherlands. I can show you examples on how we work on water quality, combining water quality with recreations and opportunities, focus on coastal defense with nature-based solutions, and always combining multifunctional challenges into projects where here, city of Katwijk is protected by a dune, and the dune is a park, but that park is also a parking garage. Only one example, we protected ourselves after the storms in 1916, in 1953, but also in our rivers, making room for the water. But that is, many examples, perhaps for a next lecture. But it's really important that next to all these projects at all scales, protecting our country, safeguarding it, it's about combining functions. Recreational space that also secure biodiversity, and when it storms, the water stays, to the smallest scale in our cities where we open up our surfaces. So we hold the water or keep it in squares to make sure that when there is too much water in a short amount of time, we can keep it. And next to these projects, we have institutional capacity. We have a Delta Commission that secures that protection, planning, and response are are capacitated and have a mandate. And of course, we have our national adaptation plan, and we work in a kingdom across the world and become very innovative. It's about collaboration. Now, that is also why, here in the conversation and in my role, we try to work together, not only on projects, but really focusing on securing the lives and livelihood of millions of people around the world by focusing on finance in our financing roundtable, by focusing on deltas, ensuring that we understand across the world how we can share lessons coming from deltas. But also we set up a high-level panel on water. A panel, heads of states, financial institute, NGOs, that came with the valuing water principles. Valuing water, investing in water has a trickle-down effect across all the SDGs. But for that you have to, and those are the principles, recognize those water values, build trust, I said it, and reconcile those values, protect our sources, our natural resources that actually ensure a resilient future, a sustainable future. It's also about education and empowerment and building capacity and innovation. An initiative that also brought us to, for instance, Colombia with the Manos al Agua project, where we work with small coffee farmers that show the way to the larger, in this case, coffee community. And there are many, many, many more examples. And in the context of the UN, we set up an adaptation summit, brought a water pavilion to the COP, and are now co-host of the second ever, first since 1977, UN Water Conference. A conference with a roadmap that started in 2020 and will lead to the summit. Next year, we will bring together the world to commit itself to change everything on water. Now, if you do this right, you use water as a way to change the world, as a mechanism to invest in, to secure the SDGs. And if you take that literally, you can say you can use it as a springboard. Investing in water really has a catalytic effect. It's a leverage, as we said. And that is, to the end of my presentation, a program I developed and set up, and we started in Asia because we did an assessment, and it was clear. Floods, droughts, pollution, subsidence, urbanization, governance issues, quality of water, health, it all is about water. And especially in these coastal cities in Asia, whoa, challenges are massive. So we came up with this approach again by turning a step-by-step, single-focused project development approach into a circular one, where we said we have to work with everybody, bring everybody together under the same tent, you could say. Literally, we did this in Chennai, bringing everybody together to secure that we focus on those solutions that work. And I'll show you one, and then I'll close. This is Chennai. I could talk about all these solutions. Only one is this. Chennai is a city in India on the coast where there is, it's a dry city, but also a wet city. It has floods and droughts, but the extremes don't pair. So that means you have floods in a very small time. The city is hardened surface and all the water moves away. And then you have dry season. So it means that the aquifer is, depleted, polluted, but also becoming saline, more saline every day. The streams are overcrowded, like here. So they become, sewage canals instead of healthy streams. And the demand is only growing because of population and economic growth. So the city is building desalination plants with a massive carbon footprint and a loan, a big loan because they cost many. And we came up with this idea that we have to turn the cycle around, back again. Capture the water, secure healthy space, bring it back to the aquifer and be able to reuse it. This goes through nature-based solutions at every scale. For flood prevention, drought prevention, sanitation, improved urban environment, we work on making spaces that really capture the water or revitalize the historic tanks, religious tanks that used to capture the water and bring them back to the aquifer. Build new tanks, help restore forests, renaturalize the canals, build bioswales and wetlands, and combine solid and liquid waste recycling while we build adaptive buildings. And if we do this on the scale of a community, you tick all the boxes of these sustainable development goals. Again, investing in water has a trickle-down effect across all SDGs. And right now we're building this pilot with the school, where we ensure water safety and security for the kids, but also create the first mini space of water as leverage, where we capture the water, bring it back, create a healthier environment. And from that school, we're scaling it up through the rest of India. Water as leverage is a way, a partnership. It's focused on the understanding of water's capacity to transform lives. It helps us set a different course, because we have to change course in the context of the challenges that we face. It's not easy. The work we do around the world, it's not easy, but it's of critical importance to deal with too much water, the quality of water, or not enough water at all. It's a balancing act. But I again quote Secretary General Guterres, is we have to massively step up our efforts. It is possible, and we have no time to waste. I wrote a little book on the work I did in this context. And in that I said, climate is perhaps our biggest challenge. We can't ignore, but we have to embrace. We have to embrace it, not single focused, but in its full complexity, because it touches upon everything. But to build trust, capacity, and enabling environment, we have to create space, time to do so, a free space. And let everybody join, be radically inclusive. Only then can we overcome the complexity and focus on those innovations that really can help us change course. One innovation leading to 100, then 1,000. Then we can act now. Then we can change course. Not for me, but for future generations like these two girls in Samara. And with that, I hand it back over. Much more to tell, but I think I said I do a short overview of the challenges and opportunities that come with water. And I stop share. Yeah, here, I found it.
Muchas gracias, Gen, por esta interesante presentación. Nos han llegado algunas preguntas. Entre ellas, puedo leer la siguiente. Ha mencionado ejemplos de distintos países muy diversos que han valorado el agua. ¿Qué tienen en común estos ejemplos que los hizo exitosos?
The examples have you could say they share, if you focus on water, quite a bit. Because water has an economic value, but water is not a commodity. It's a human right. But water-related services, perhaps you can put a price on. But water is also of critical importance for everything and everyone. So there is a value. Without water, no food. So hey, think about it. No energy, no security. So while the challenges of too much water, too little water, pollution of water, climate, urbanization, all perhaps are a little different, the way water plays a critical role in that is more or less the same. So if you understand that, by research, by collaboration, by education, by promotion, building awareness, politically, but also I work with kids. I was 2 weeks ago with 3 school classes of youngsters, 8, 9 years, talking about water, making them understand how important. At the same time, have conversations with ministers of finance and investors. Everybody has to understand and see that value of water. And if you see that complexity, you're able to start to value it. And I listed the valuing water principles that help inform different partnerships across the world, being it in Latin America, Africa, Asia, Europe, or anywhere else. Valuing water principles does help inform a partnership that understands the complexity, values it, and starts to manage. So that is one. So that is about the complexity and the understanding and the need of awareness and capacity. There's an institutional one. Water is organized around the world, very fragmented. And I think we learn a lot of lessons from around the world where less fragmented way of organizing ourselves as governments, but also private sector around water is of critical importance to reduce risks and add value. So the governance aspect is important, organizational capacity. Finance, of course, there's a lack of funding, and there's a clear need of innovation. Now, why do we need, and I try to explain it a bit, but the pipelines we have ready, and the climate change and land report makes us the pipelines of projects we have ready make us more vulnerable. If we start to become more innovative in nature-based solutions from across the world, we really will be able to change course. So those are some generic aspects to that. Of course, there are more. At the same time, we have to understand that a culture, a governance, legal framework, and physical conditions everywhere around the world are different. So there is no plane with solutions. You can fly around the world and say, oh, I drop my solutions here in Panama and then in Durban, and then I go to Mumbai and everything will be okay. No, it really is about, tailoring based on these principles, everything you need to do on the ground. I also think that is amazing because it means building capacity comes from the ground. It doesn't come from a plane. Building capacity is really about working with the people that, that it matters most to, creating ownership, and that ownership ensures a consistent and continuous approach. So I think there is a real advantage to that. There is no silver bullet. There's also a challenge because too many people around the world think that there is a silver bullet. But we have to tell them that is actually a lie. There is no silver bullet.
Muchas gracias por la respuesta, Henk. Otra pregunta sería, ¿qué recomendación le daría usted a las organizaciones, a los que están ahorita participando, por dónde deben iniciar, sobre todo enfocado al sector industrial?
That's a good question. Especially, so there are many examples, and it starts by, and this can start very simple, but don't wait until the disaster hits. A couple of examples. One is from IKEA, a Swedish company. They had a plant in Poland. And one day, the government, the authority that was responsible for water, called them and said, hello, IKEA plant, we're shutting off the water now. And they had no clue that they were so dependent on water. So the government shut off the water, the whole plant went down, everybody went home. And then they looked around and said, where are we actually? Oh, we are in an amazing watershed. And it rains, right? So why are we so dependent on the tap? And they started to rethink what water meant for their factory and their sustainability policy, but also what it practically meant for the plant. And they turned the plant instead of from a water user into a water producer. Now they capture all the water, they clean it, they use it for but it's more than enough. So they give it back to the grid. It's a simple example, but it starts with understanding how water relates to everything you do and then taking action on the level that you can take. Second, and an example by Heineken, for instance, is the same. In Mexico, they're building a plant. If you want to produce a liter of beer, you need many more liters of beer, or many more liters of water. They turned the plant into a 2-liter plant, and because of the conversations we had, I said, why don't you also focus on the leftover? So the sludge that is left over, they now use for energy, and the last drop that comes out is used for the community and agriculture. So no drop is lost. So you could say there are principles to that. Reduce your water use, reuse the water, and recycle it for other uses. So you reduce your water, you reuse it within the system, and you recycle it outside of the system. That's that is not, if we look at the water footprint a company has, that is always bigger because it's about the supply chain and so forth. So I think the first is to look at your own system. The second is to look at the environment that you work in, mostly a watershed. Are there critical partners in that watershed you can work together to secure water? Yeah? Agriculture, industry, financiers, cities, water users, single and collective, that can come together and say, hey, upstream and downstream, groundwater and rainwater, in times of droughts and floods, we can take care of that water collectively. So set up transboundary or watershed collaborations. There are many examples of watershed funds because you share that same water. So you can also share the challenge, the burdens, as well as the returns. So that is a way, so your own and then working together. And then look at those principles, those value and water principles, and see what you can do. And hopefully also, if you come up with solutions that are innovative and that those partnerships that can inspire, bring them to the world. Show that others can do the same. And that's a little bit what we try to do with the Valuing Water initiative, that we put a spotlight on partnerships that bring solutions to see if those spotlighted partnerships and solutions can be the inspiration for scaling up what we so much need.
Muchísimas gracias, todo lo que has expuesto nos ayuda a reflexionar un poco más acerca del valor del agua. Nosotros como gremio hacemos un gran esfuerzo para que siempre tengamos estos temas en nuestro día a día. Como industriales, sabemos que tenemos que cuidar este recurso. No sé si alguien más tiene alguna pregunta. Pueden habilitar el micrófono. Si no, pues los invitamos a que se mantengan comunicados con nosotros a través de nuestras redes sociales, a través de nuestro canal de YouTube. Nosotros vamos a tener esta presentación habilitada en nuestro canal de YouTube. Sí, aquí pregunta Gillian Herrera si podemos recibir la grabación. Pueden recibirla o pueden buscar sindicatos industriales en YouTube y ahí va a estar grabada la presentación. Muchas gracias a Jean-Philippe, a Henk por el tiempo. Sabemos que ustedes son personas muy ocupadas, así es que valoramos mucho esta presentación y que siempre tengan el espacio para nosotros. Muchas gracias a todos por participar. Hasta luego.
Thank you so much for organizing. It was a pleasure and an honor. And do know that we at the embassy are always there to make the connection with you, to explore partnerships, but also if you have good ideas. We are strong believers that only through working together we can develop a better future. There is no Dutch solution that will save the world, but there's only collective action that works. And I'm pretty sure, and learning from you will be as inspiring as learning from us. And exactly in where we come together, we can envision opportunities. And last, perhaps, if we do that right, those stories, those partnerships, is what we can also bring to this UN conference next year. Because the world needs to be shown that there is an alternative, that past practices are not the guarantee for the future, but that by working together, we can come up with solutions and practices that do change, that bring that change that we so much need. So I really look forward, and my colleagues at the embassy and in the Netherlands at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water, and I see many colleagues on the call, so thank you for joining. Really look forward to expand this conversation with you. And I really want to thank you for not only your patience in listening to me, but also your questions. So thanks so much and have a great day.
Disculpa, Gen, tenemos una manito levantada de Israel Torres. Israel, si puede hacer su pregunta, ya tenemos tiempo.
Sí, gracias. Gracias,
Yeah.
Gen, ¿me escuchan? Gracias, Gen, por la presentación muy, muy amplia. Entendemos que el cambio climático va a tener un impacto muy grande en el sector agua. Y pues no hay otro mecanismo más que la adaptación y tenemos que adaptarnos. Pero la huella de Panamá, la huella hídrica de Panamá es alta porque tenemos un alto consumo, no solamente para el sector salud, sino para el sector económico. Entonces es ahí donde queremos ver a través de ciertos programas, el ministerio, soy parte del Ministerio de Ambiente, hemos llevado un programa llamado Reduce tu huella hídrica con el sector corporativo, el sector industrial, para ver cómo reducimos esa huella del agua que se produce a través de ciertos productos aquí en Panamá y creándole un sello verde en esa sostenibilidad del recurso. Es un paso que hace desde la parte de gobierno en tratar de que todos juntos podamos trabajar hacia minimizar el consumo del agua. Ahora bien, hay una parte primordial de este programa, es cómo miramos, y aquí viene mi pregunta, ¿cómo miramos una huella hídrica de un producto sostenible versus un mercado que no existe? Es decir, tenemos un mercado de carbono porque tú estás absorbiendo carbono, pero no tenemos un mercado de agua internacional pero sí tenemos una huella azul, ¿ya? Pero no existe un mercado. ¿Cómo tú ves esto de aquí a muchos años? ¿Se podrá crear un mercado internacional donde las buenas acciones a través de una huella azul puede ser gratificado a la producción? Esta es mi pregunta. Gracias. Hey.
Thank you, Israel Torres. And that is a great question. There was a professor who passed away too young at the University of Twente, Enschede, in the east of the Netherlands, that started the Water Footprint Network. And his work, also after his death, is continuing. That Water Footprint Network is also brought forward through the Valuing Water initiative. But at the last climate conference in Glasgow, the UK government started a water footprint coalition or alliance, at least a partnership. That partnership is really also aimed at not so much creating a market, because that would, make the same mistake as in the past as we did with our other commodities, but create an enabling environment. Perhaps a marketplace instead of a market, where there will be an opportunity in how to share this. Valuing Water Initiative is already doing that, but with the Water Footprint Network and the work we're doing with the UK, that is possible. So what I will do quickly, I put 2 links in the chat for you to look into. And they're in English, but so that will be okay. Yeah, they're not in. So this is the Valuing Water Initiative one, and the Water Footprint. Okay, COP26. And the Global Water Footprint. Fair Water Footprint. Here it is. And this is the Fair Water Footprint Network launched at COP. That would be that could be a start to look into and see how we can expand it. I hope, I don't have answer in the sense of a solution answer to you, but an answer in the sense of this could be ways to look into this. And then perhaps also to really make sure that I do everything right. This is the water footprint network. And that is, of course, where it all started, and that is still very much alive. And that comes from the Netherlands. I hope that helps, Israel.
Muchas gracias, Hen. Nos quedamos con los enlaces. Vamos a estar revisándolos. Gracias a todos por la participación y esperamos que este sea, bueno, ya es el segundo de los conversatorios que realizamos. Nos mantenemos en contacto y pronto le estaremos enviando invitación. Es que organizamos uno más adelante. Gracias a todos por participar y que tengan un muy buen día.
And I put in another link, which is actually the link to the Water as Leverage program. So you can see more examples, but also scroll to the World Water Atlas and see many more examples from across the world and the opportunity to engage. And I think that is the middle, just the main message. Figure out, and that's why I like the question so much, figure out how can these conversations and these Q&As, these questions and answers lead to something to partner on. And I see Michael and Bob on the screen. So they're here ready to take on this call. Thank you very much for hosting us. Best of success.
Gracias a ustedes. Hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto. Muchas gracias.